Thank you so much, Joe. Here's how I'd like to begin my remarks. Abraham Joshua Heschel taught that our spiritual tradition, quote, begins with a consciousness that something is asked of us. But what is asked of us now at this moment, as we navigate family, work, volunteer commitments, friendships, and Jewish celebrations from a distance? What's asked of us in a world where Zoom has replaced face-to-face meetings, and I would much rather be there with you in person than to be giving this talk over Zoom? What's asked of us as we live deep in a place of fear, and for some, already the reality of illness and loss? What's asked of us as we lead amazing organizations like JFS, where the need is now greater than ever, where resources are challenged, and we are morally bound to do more at exactly the time when our energy, our hope, and our courage are increasingly challenged? I'm deeply honored to deliver the Chester and Diane Black Lecture on volunteerism and community engagement for JFS this year. For almost 40 years, I was the rabbi and executive director of Hillel at Tufts, and not only did Chester and Diane have a special connection to Tufts, but again and again, their community leadership was inspiring. And I was privileged to work with JFS during my time at Tufts, whether addressing issues of homelessness, compassionately working with friends who longed to adopt a child, or working with Mark on an amazing project to welcome Syrian refugees. The work of JFS, the quality of the staff, the authentic commitment to live out Jewish values has made JFS a model organization in our community. I've long admired Mark and loved when I read that U.B. Jones called Mark a long-distance runner for social justice. It's really true. And I know it was hard to fill Mark's shoes, but the organization did just a stellar job in hiring Lino. And Lino and his entire staff at JFS exemplify what the Jewish tradition teaches when we're called to see every human being is created in the image of the Holy One. People who approach their work with courage and instill hope in the lives of so many. So over my years at Tufts, I learned how precious excellent lay leadership is for an organization, and I send a special shout out for the wonderful and exemplary leadership of Dave Milo as he steps down as chair. And as my friend Joe Volman, and Joe and I have known each other for many years, comes into leadership at chair, and Joe was a board member at Tufts Hillel, I know that Joe will bring his vision, his deep intelligence, and his commitment to JFS, and you will be positioned to move from strength to strength. So returning to this question of what is asked of us now, I want to share some perspectives that have emerged from the Innovation Lab I've been privileged to direct at Hebrew College this year. In this lab, rabbinic students and recently ordained rabbis developed a range of creative, educational, spiritual, social justice, and interfaith projects in the greater Boston community. And many of the issues that we've been discussing on thought leadership, creative innovation, courage, and hope speak to the challenges that leaders and organizations face now as we do our best to live with integrity, purpose, and compassion at this extraordinary time. So first, thought leadership. At its core, thought leadership begins by asking questions. As you look around you, what emerging issues are simply being missed by our institutions, organizations, and current leadership? What are the greatest needs? What's being ignored? What work needs to be done? And how do you understand your life and your action in relation to that work? On a deeper level, when we engage in thought leadership, we ask about the work behind the work. What frame do we use to understand what we're actually doing in our lives at this moment? The poet Marge Piercy writes about beautiful vases that are now put in museums, and she muses that while they're in museums, they were created to be used. And she writes, quote, "The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real." And I think what could possibly be more real now than standing up to support those who have been left behind? The elderly, the homeless, human beings who are hungry, refugees in need of a job and a home. I also love the work of the poet Mary Oliver, and Mary Oliver writes, "My work is loving the world." And I so wish that more leaders, more organizations framed their work that way now. The Jewish tradition teaches that love isn't an abstract feeling. Love is caring made real through action, making sure that human beings have a roof over their heads, food to eat, safety, and security. What could be more in line than the work that JFS is doing now? At a time when our country and our world is so polarized, so divided into us and them, we could model our tradition's value of valuing all human beings, a tradition that teaches that even when we disagree, the human being you're interacting with is precious and holy. It's neither an exaggeration nor self-aggrandizing to say that the stance of each one of us, when we project our work, the attitudes we radiate, both in our organizational commitments and in our personal lives, are shaping the future every day of our children, our friends, our families, and communities. So let me take a deeper look at two concepts, courage and hope, in order to see how those concepts could shape our lives now. Courage and the everyday necessities of being alive. Entering the current reality is like traveling to a new country. It's unknown and unexplored. But this is not the first time that we as a people have been in a really challenging, difficult situation. In the 1940s, writing as the Nazis were ascendant in power in Europe, the French writer Anis Nin said, quote, "We lose some of our faith under the oppression of mad leaders, insane history, pathologic cruelties of daily life, and still," Nin asserts, "the importance of remembering to live," in her words, "with curiosity and exploration." She wrote, "I am by nature always beginning and believing. I like to live always at the beginning of life, not at its end." So in its essence, thought leadership is living at the beginnings, being proactive, believing in and asserting our own agency. Addressing these challenges is not for the faint of heart. These are scary times, and we need to ask, what does courage look like in our lives now? I believe that increasingly raising courageous voice is the work of regular people doing their work really well, living their lives with grace and generosity, modeling new visions of community and connection. The poet David White writes, "Courage is what love looks like when tested by the simple everyday necessities of being alive." I think courage also means being present when it really counts. I want to share a story that I learned from Rabbi Larry Kushner. He calls it "The Stranger on the Bus." And this is a true story, and it happened in Munich in Nazi Germany. Here's the story. A woman had been riding a city bus home from work when SS stormtroopers suddenly stopped the coach and began examining the identity papers of the passengers. Most were annoyed, but a few were terrified. Jews were being told to leave the bus and get in a truck around the corner. The woman watched from her seat in the rear as the soldiers systematically worked their way down the aisle, and she began to tremble, tears streaming down her face. When the man next to her noticed she was crying, he politely asked her why. I don't have the papers you have. I'm a Jew. They're going to take me away. The man exploded in disgust. He began to curse and scream at her. "You stupid cow," he roared. "I can't stand being near you." The SS men asked what all the yelling was about. "Damn her," the man shouted angrily. "My wife has forgotten her papers again. I'm so fed up. She always does this." The soldiers laughed and moved on. Now that was a moment of extraordinary courage, to step up and be fully present when it mattered most. And of course, that's an extraordinary story from an extraordinary time. But I believe that if we attune ourselves to the world around us, each of us has opportunities when we could step up and seriously make a difference in people's lives, when we could do transformative work, and when people are desperate, hungry, lost, without resources or work, our actions can literally save their lives. And there's another form of courage so important now. It takes courage to remain hopeful when so much is blurry and unsure. I want to talk about how I like my hope, which is hope with a side order of reality. Some of us have mantras, phrases that keep running through our mind in times of challenge and difficulty. I realize that one of mine is from Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem. Od lo avda tikvatenu, Hatikva bat shanot alpayim. We have not lost our hope, the hope that's persisted for thousands of years. I think living well through this situation is being able to convey to the people around us, even in our fear and uncertainty, that there will be a time when it will be better, when we will clasp hands, hug one another, feel safe again, be secure, celebrate in actual community, and play and work. At the same time, because I'm Jewish, I like my hope served with a side order of reality. So I'm drawn to the work of the writer and activist Rebecca Solnit, who says, quote, "It's important to say what hope is not, because it's not the belief that everything was, is, or will be just fine." She says, "The hope I'm interested in locates itself in the premise that we don't know what will happen, and in the spaciousness of uncertainty, we have room to act. You recognize that you might be able to influence the outcomes, you alone, or in concert with a few dozen or several million others." At its core, I believe that the work that JFS does is about the power to act. We didn't choose to be in this difficult time, but we can choose how we will manage the experience, choose what we will do, what we will model and teach as we go through these difficulties. In conclusion, I'd say that while I'm not in a silver linings frame of mind, it's true that for many people, the experience of living through and leading in crisis is the refiner's fire that shapes our life and our work going forward. There will be a time when this is over, and I want to be able to look back and say that I comported myself well, that I found ways to be value added to the lives of the people whom I love and the people who came to know me during this crisis. I want to be able to say that I lived with courage, and I held out the hope that we would use the lessons we learned to think deeply and bring more love, compassion, and hope into our many worlds. Thank you so much. I'm really honored that I was invited to be with you.